Welcome to another edition of Scherable. I'm your host, Bill Scher, another In My Mother's Basement edition. I want to talk a bit about, I'm trying to get my head around how the pandemic affected this election. And I'm doing some public processing on Twitter and just shared the great Alex Rorty. Alex Rorty writes for McClatchy. He had an exploration of this question this morning. And there obviously the pandemic didn't make Trump support collapse. So that is raising the question whether the pandemic had any impact at all, or even maybe helped him to some degree, that there was an appetite for his message about liberation and being anti-expert, anti-intellectual. And I wrote before the election, my very famous Biden will win piece, that I argue, don't argue once Biden wins that it was only because of the pandemic that Trump lost. Trump himself was putting forth that rebuttal during the campaign because Trump was losing in the first place. Trump was always underwater in job approval. Biden was always ahead of Trump in the polls. So there's no serious argument that the economy was going to buoy him, and only that was thwarted when the pandemic hit. And I said in that piece that, if anything, the pandemic was an opportunity because it was a chance for him to reset the table and show he had grown in the job, he was a responsible leader, whatever you think about his personal style. At the end of the day, he's running a tight ship and is keeping us safe. And he chose to go in the opposite direction, and so he lost that opportunity. And I think all these things are true. I think it's true that A, Biden was going to win anyway. B, Trump missed an opportunity by not taking the pandemic seriously. And C, there was an appetite for his pandemic approach. And that did help him maintain his base in places where the pandemic hit very hard. And I think perhaps added some votes from people, maybe not someone who was anti-Trump and then suddenly became pro-Trump, but folks who were moving his way that like that style, that like that I beat COVID and you can too, self-help guru, screw the experts, confidence. I think there are people who are like that, probably mostly men. And I think that probably cuts across racial lines. There's some evidence, exit polling is a treacherous business, and we shouldn't be we should be treating polls as gospel anymore, probably. I probably need to learn my lesson about that. But there is some evidence that he improved with Black men. We know he won Miami-Dade with the help of Latinos, particularly Cubans. And so it's possible that young people, a certain cohort of young men of all backgrounds, liked that defiance. So there's a couple of ways couple of takeaways you can discern from that. One is folks like me who tend to argue that just running the government in a responsible way has its political benefits. It's not that simple, because we see that there is a large appetite for a connection that politicians can make devoid of their actual competence in government, that can allow people to rationalize and excuse poor job performance. But at the same time, I still wouldn't recommend that the average government official, and particularly Republican officials, now obviously this anti-elitist strain in the American electorate is certainly partial to Republicans these days. And when we hear folks talk about the Republican Party becoming more of a working class party, I think, I don't think they're ever going to be the party of the working class top to bottom, but there definitely is an anti-elitist element to the working class vote, anti-intellectual, anti-science. This is the college, non-college educated divide that remains in the country. If you don't have a particular respect for a college education, not having gone yourself, it's not a question of being, smart people versus stupid people. This is a question of, if you haven't gone through the college experience and you don't have that innate respect for it, you're less inclined to be told, trust what this person is saying, they are the expert. So that element remains in the country, and Trump tapped into that, and that is siding with Republicans more than Democrats these days. That helps explain why Trump didn't bottom out in this election and remained around 46% of the vote. We'll see what the final number is once all the votes come in. Right now he's at 47. That might tick down once California votes and New York votes and Illinois votes, get fully counted. And so that might make a Republican say, don't change a thing. We didn't lose by that much. We still picked up votes in the House. They're still there, and this might even help us diversify the party. We kept being maligned for being an all-white party. Well, maybe that's changing a little bit. Maybe we can use some of our natural attributes to make further inroads with minority communities. So I can get that logic, but I would still argue, even if it's not as slam dunk an argument, that Trump would have gained more votes if he actually contained the pandemic. It wouldn't have been that hard to be a evangelist for mask wearing. It wouldn't even require him to support fierce lockdowns. Just doing his due diligence in public health communication could have gone a long way, could have gotten people who are partial to him. The places that are getting hit the hardest right now are the redder areas of the country, the rural areas, the Midwest and the plains, and areas of the South. If those folks were given that message and they took to it, that could have made the pandemic less deadly, less widespread, and gained him respect from even some of those college-educated voters. And so, that right-leaning suburbanite college-educated vote that was a Mitt Romney vote that has been trending away from Trump. Maybe Trump could have kept more of that and actually eked out a victory. So we have these competing strains in the electorate that make analysis, complicated but interesting. And I would still, even though I know more now than I did 2 weeks ago, and maybe would have written a different piece, a different Biden will win piece, knowing what I know now, I do think the bottom line is the same, that Trump was always losing. Trump being a poor president, a divisive president, disinterested in the actual nuts and bolts of the job president, was the biggest albatross around his neck. And if he fixed that with the pandemic, he might have actually won. But we also, I think Democrats also have to recognize that, Biden's argument, science over fiction, has its own appeal and might even have majority appeal because it's helping bring in that college-educated suburbanite vote. But it doesn't have as broad appeal, as widespread appeal as perhaps we would like to think. It is still hard to get to 55, 60% saying trust the experts. So the challenge now for Biden is to trust the experts and show that's making people's lives better. That's making people's lives better who currently are distrustful of experts. And that won't be so simple to do when you don't have unified government. But that is the challenge that faces the Democratic Party and the Biden administration. I'll leave it there. I'll keep this shareable short and sweet. If you like this, please subscribe on YouTube. If you want to support it financially, please go to patreon.com/BillShare. And I'll see you here on the YouTubes soon enough. Take care, everybody.